and fair housing. So there's a lot of confusion about the rights and responsibilities of landlords and tenants when it comes to making units wheelchair accessible. For this discussion, we're going to focus on existing structures that are not wheelchair accessible and to talk about what should be done when a tenant is seeking accessibility that may require modifications. So first, we define persons with disabilities. So under the Fair Housing Act amendment, the disability is defined as the following: having a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities, and or having a record of a physical or mental impairment, and or being perceived by another as an individual with a physical or mental impairment. And it's very key to know that it could be all or just one of the following three that we just covered. So we also have to talk about when individuals have visual or speaking impairments or they're deaf or hard of hearing. The landlord must ensure that individuals with visual impairments or speaking impairments can effectively communicate with them. So for example, they may need a rental application that's in large print. They may need it in Braille. Landlords should be familiar with the video relay service known as DRS. It will allow people who are deaf or hard of hearing to communicate through telephone systems. The DRS caller may use television or computer with a video camera device and broadband internet connection, and they would actually communicate with somebody who is qualified at the American Sign Language system, and they would communicate through a video link. So landlords should be able to communicate with folks who have these impairments easily. We also know that if someone may have a need for an assistance animal. So if someone has a doctor who has told them that they need to have this animal, it's determined by a physician, then tenants would provide the housing provider with a written statement from their physician that they would need this accommodation, and that housing provider cannot charge an extra pet fee. So if there's a no pet policy, they should still be able to have that pet with them. And then we want to know what it means to make that request. So if somebody needs that reasonable accommodation, how should they go ahead in making the request? So the landlord should take the following steps in terms of a request. They may ask for verification. They may, but they can't go ask for any more inquiry. They can't ask anything beyond the request. And they need to establish that it's necessary. And if in fact it is, and the accommodation is reasonable, and that means that it would not produce an undue burden or result in a fundamental alteration of the property. So the landlord must allow for the modification if it's reasonable. We discussed that. And it's not just the act of moving furniture around. You have to keep that in mind as well. And then the question is, so who's going to pay for it? So it's determined that a modification is reasonable, and then you have to ask the question of who pays for it. So if there are federal funds involved, then the landlord must pay for it. If there is the occupancy is allowed after March 13th, 1991, then again the landlord must pay for it. But if the property is going to be, there's no federal funding and there's minimal accessibility requirements, then it would be the tenant that pays for it. So we see first on the slide here, if the property was developed even in part with federal funds, the landlord must pay. If the building was ready for occupancy for the first time after March 13th, 1991, then it will be subject to the Fair Housing Act and must be physically accessible, so the owners are going to be financially responsible. And then lastly, if there are no federal funds and it meets the minimum accessibility requirements, then the tenant must pay. But keep in mind that the landlord can require the tenant to comply with building codes, architectural codes, and also require them to have a certified contractor to complete the work. And then the landlord can also require at the end of the tenancy that they put the building back into the same condition that it was before they did the modification. So they reverse that, they take the modification out, unless it's something that's fairly minor and does not really impact future tenancies, such as grab bars or widened doorways. Those do not necessarily have to be moved back or transitioned back. And also, it's important to know that you may have a tenant who has a lower income source, and they may have challenges if they want to leave down the road to go to another property, find another home, to turn it back and having the finances available to do that. So you can set them up with the landlord, in fact, should set them up with an escrow account. So month by month they can put money in so that they can be prepared to reverse the items that changes they have made to the property.